So we have an opportunity here today to hear from one of the great business leaders of the world, the great visionaries of the world, about social entrepreneurship, about adventure, about business, about the Virgin Group, and about outer space. So please join me in welcoming Sir Richard Branson to London Business School.
Well, I thought rather than making a speech, it might be better to interact with you and find out what sort of questions you'd like to ask of me. So I think we've got 6 roving microphones, and if anybody'd like to throw out some questions, I'd be happy to answer. Presumably you're from all over the world, are you? Every country represented here, but.
They are indeed from all over the world.
I did this once in Japan. I flew all the way to Japan, went down to a place called Miyakinojo in the south of Japan, where university students wanted to ask me questions, and I said exactly what I just said. And for 5 minutes, not one person put their hand up. And so I then said, well, look, I'll tell you what, first person who puts their hand up gets 2 upper-class tickets to London. And from we were off.
I think I saw a hand right back there immediately, actually. So yes, where 3 is. Right.
Shall I stand over there so I can see you? Okay.
So Richard, I'm David McGrath. I'm one of the executive MBA students here at London Business School. And our class is actually finishing up our last 2 days together. And we're very honoured to be here with you today. But one of the things that we're looking at is making meaning in a modern business world. And I'm interested to hear your perspective as to being a serial entrepreneur, how you make meaning in the businesses that you enter, and how not only are they there to make a profit, obviously, for your group and your shareholders, but also how do they contribute back into the community? Thank you.
Well, it's a good question, and I think that initially when you set up in business, really there's only one thing that matters, and that's survival. And I think that if you're starting a business from scratch and you haven't got any financial backing, you just got to survive. If you don't survive, you can't make a difference in the world. You can't employ people. You can't build your business. So I think for a number of years, you shouldn't be worried too much about sorting out the world's problems. You just got to make sure that you stand on your own 2 feet, and you can get your cash flow going, and you can be one of the few survivors, because most people who set up in business fall flat on their face. I think something like 90% of new businesses that are set up in Britain don't survive. So it's not easy. Having said that, then I think later on in your career, if you start making some money, and if you know that you've got your feet firmly on the ground, then I think enormous responsibility comes with becoming a successful entrepreneurial businessman, because unlike becoming a successful doctor, or actually a doctor maybe not be the best example, but a successful nurse or journalist, or success in any other field, extreme wealth comes with becoming a successful entrepreneur. And if capitalism is to be is to be given a good name rather than a bad name, it's essential that capitalists and entrepreneurs give back to society, and you can do that in a number of ways. I mean, one way is obviously to reinvest that wealth in creating new businesses, new jobs, and that in itself is important, and something which I suspect most people in this room will do. The other thing is to actually think about the money that you're spending, and maybe invest it in socially responsible areas, so that it can actually so I mean, for instance, there was a mention of ethanol earlier. Look at sort of clean fuels rather than unclean fuels to invest in, and surprisingly you might find you can make as much money that way anyway. And then obviously the third thing is to tackle some of the more fundamental issues that face the world. And a successful entrepreneurial businessman, I suspect, can have more effect in tackling some of the social problems in this world than politicians can. So I think you can find yourself in a stronger position. But thank you. I look for number one, do I?
My name's Patrick Moore. I was at the school, left in 1999. It's really developing a theme. You mentioned ethanol. I'd be very interested to hear more about how you're getting on with the bioethanol and whether you're looking at other biofuels, biodiesel, that sort of thing. Just that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the airline business and I'm in the train business, and we obviously do our fair share of damage to the environment. Equally, fuel prices have gone up by $400 million a year in the last 2 years. That's what Virgin is costing Virgin in excess than it did 2 years ago. So, as a businessman, we examined, what can we do about these increased fuel prices? And you can no longer hedge because they've stayed high for 2 years. So hedging possibilities have effectively run out. So we then examined fundamentally, what was the cause for these high fuel prices? Was there anything we could do about the cause? I mean, could we take OPEC to court for colluding? Could we, if there's a shortage of oil refining capacity, could we set up more oil refineries to try to, break the logjam on the oil refining capacity? And actually, that's what we decided to do. And then I met a man called Reed Detchen who works for Ted Turner. Ted Turner set up a small fund at the United Nations to try to make businessmen more aware about the environment. And he said, look, if you're going to set up a refinery, why set up a refinery producing more dirty fuels? Why don't you set up a refinery that's producing clean fuels? And so for the last 2.5 years, we set up a team of people, and we've looked at every aspect of clean fuels. There's ordinary ethanol, which comes from the fruits, the corn, the grain, etc., the sugar, and that now with fuel prices at $80 a barrel is a very, very profitable substance to produce. It's about 50% more environmentally friendly than dirty fuels are, and then we looked at something called cellulose ethanol, which is basically the waste product that's left in the fields, and if you can use enzymes to break down that waste product. Now the advantage of cellulose ethanol is it's 100% environmentally friendly, and if you in your cars use metal rods instead of rubber rods, you can use 90% cellulose ethanol or ordinary ethanol in your cars. You can do the same in trains, in buses. So we could actually replace 90% of fuel needs with cellulose ethanol, and there's enough waste product out there to do so. It just needs the best enzymes to break it down and make it economically viable. Now that's not quite there yet, but it's something which we're investing money in, trying to speed up that process. And then obviously we're looking at things like wind power. We're looking at solar power, and we're also even looking at sort of setting up companies which can help families. If somebody wants to be in an environmentally friendly home or a factory, or just to have a number they can ring so they can actually get the advice, because I think a lot of people want to help, but there isn't actually, it's a good business for somebody here to set up anyway. If we don't, or come and do it with us. But the interesting thing, was, that suddenly we realised that actually the alternative fuels can be as profitable as conventional fuels, maybe even more so. And so you can actually run a good business. You can sort out the environment, and maybe even bring fuel prices down. So So it could be a win-win-win situation.
Perfect. Why don't we go to two? We'll do. And then we're going to move back after this to the back of the room. So I'll come back there.
Sorry. It's Richard Stevens. I was on the Senior Executive Programme in 1999. Taking you back to your roots, you had a passion for music. At some point, you took that next step beyond that. How long did that take? What was that decision, and how did you reach it?
We had a very successful record company, and we had people like the Rolling Stones, Janet Jackson. It was going extremely well. We set up companies around the world, so that we had our own companies producing our own music around the world, and I spent a lot of time on aeroplanes, and the experience, this was 21 years ago, was dire. I mean, it was, you had, people who obviously weren't enjoying working for the particular airline. They never smiled. A lump of chicken was dumped in your lap if you were lucky halfway through the flight. There was, no entertainment whatsoever. You couldn't, no films. And it was dirty. It was just like you're treated like cattle, shipped from A to B. And I thought, maybe we can create the kind of airline that I'd like to fly. And I sat down my fellow directors at Virgin Records and told them that I'm thinking of going into the airline business. The person who I thought was my best friend was no longer my best friend. They obviously thought I was, I think the words megalomaniac, heaven knows what was used over that lunch. So I knew that I had to convince them that I wasn't completely insane. And I'm sure that at the London Business School they teach you about protecting the downside, trying to make sure that that any move you make is not going to bring everything collapsing down around you. So I rang up Boeing and said to Boeing, "Do you have any second-hand 747s for sale?" And they'd never heard of this company called Virgin or Richard Branson. And anyway, I managed to do a deal with Boeing. I said, BA dominant in England. There's no other alternative competitor. Just give me one plane for 12 months. If it works out, we might buy lots of planes off you. If it doesn't work out, we'll hand that plane back to you. And that, by knowing that I could hand that plane back at the end of the first 12 months, I knew, what the maximum amount of money I could lose was in that first 12 months. I knew that our profits for the record company were, it was about 50% of our profits, so it wasn't going to bring everything crashing down. And it gave us a chance to, see whether I was right that creating the kind of airline that I was planning to create, that it would work. And then after 12 months, fortunately, people like Virgin Atlantic and rang up Boeing and said, "Give us another plane instead of taking that one back." And then it just grew, grew from there. When we only had that one plane, Anthony Sampson, who's some of you may have read some of his books, who was doing a book about the airline business, and he rang me up and he was talking about airline safety, and my response was, well, I suppose with one plane we'll either have the best safety record in the world or the worst.
Hi, I'm Peter Conlon. I'm in the first year MBA class. One of the greatest things you've been able to create is this tremendously powerful brand. When that started, that sort of started as sort of a low-cost, sort of alternative, almost anti-establishment brand. How have you been able to develop that over time to take it up to be applicable to luxury products? Because you now seem to have the full spectrum of products in your sort of portfolio.
Yeah, I mean, when we started, I was never conscious of creating a brand. We just were, I was wanting to create magazines or record shops or record company. Hadn't really, realised that that over time we were actually creating quite a potent brand in itself. We're obviously an unusual brand in that, if you look at say, the other sort of 20 most successful brands in the world. You've got, Coca-Cola specializing in soft drinks. You've got Microsoft specializing in computers. You've got, Nike specializing in shoes. Virgin is more, has become a way of life brand. And I suppose that's because over the years I'm inquisitive. I love new challenges. I love, taking on big established players in big established sectors and seeing if we can move in on their sector and hopefully make sure that sector is never quite the same again. So whether it's the airline sector or the train sector or the mobile phone sector or whatever, and we'll only move into a sector if we know that we can make a real difference, if we can bring better quality, if we can bring better value, if we can have fun shaking up that industry. You're right. I mean, when we started, with Virgin Records, we were based just on price, and that's, I think, it's quite difficult to lift a brand from a price-led brand, low cost brand into high cost. I think it's easier to start the other way around. But in time, I think things like Virgin Upper Class product, where in the airline industry we stood out as offering, the best business class product, that helped sort of lift the brand. I think we're now perceived more as a brand that's gone for quality, but offering good value rather than say an EasyJet, which has really gone for low price right across the brand. And it's easier, I think, if you've got a brand that is synonymous with quality to then offer good value as well. But thank you.
Come up here, front row. Then I'll go over there. I just want to let the next time I'll go back on this side.
Hi, my name is Melanie. Virgin in Latin America is still a very mild brand compared to the rest of the world. Is there any plan to move to that region, or?
You're right, and it's strange that almost every other country in the world, Virgin is now established, and Latin America we're not, and not even one little bit, I think. And we started. Brazil obviously is a country which is really happening and is something as a country we're looking at. But often often the way we've actually get going in the country is an individual or some individuals from a particular country come to us and they say, well, we can take a particular business that Virgin's doing there, and and if we like the individual, we'll say, well, go ahead and get on with it. So come and see us.
Hi, my name is Asbjørn Kastanjegard. I'm a full-time MBA student at school. I was wondering, what are your criteria that you use to evaluate the feasibility of an investment? And also, how do you decide when is a good time to sell?
Well, with Virgin, our brand is incredibly important to us. So we won't go into a new investment unless we think it can enhance the brand, and unless we think we can make a real difference, as I said earlier, in that particular sector that we're going into, and unless we think we're going to actually enjoy it, because I mean, you spend so much time working, you might as well have a good time. And unless the individuals who've come to us with the project or are people we're going to get on with, and we feel are the right people, if all those criteria fall into place, I'm more likely to give it a go than not. And perhaps say, one of my faults is I think maybe I say yes too often, but we just love a new challenge. As far as selling is concerned, we often sell things at such a time, because we're not generally our group of companies is a private group of companies, and although we have one or two public companies, we normally we'll sell a company once we feel it's reached maturity, and at a stage where we can then reinvest in starting up new businesses. Our main skills is starting businesses, not running large businesses, and I think that's what we enjoy most. So I don't think we've ever bought a business. I think all our businesses were started off as little acorns, and we've grown them from scratch. And I also often sell with reluctance. I mean, Virgin Records, we had British Airways determinedly trying to put the airline out of business, and some of you may have studied the Dirty Tricks campaign that they waged against Virgin, and I had to sell Virgin Records in order to combat that campaign from British Airways. And I remember running down the street, having just told the staff that that I'd sold, and passing an Evening Standard headline which says Branson sells for $1 billion, with tears streaming down my face, and thinking if anybody could see me sort of sobbing my head off, and this headline, they'd wonder, they'd send me off to a nut house. But anyway, no, but I mean, selling things can be difficult. If you build up a company where people matter, then you're selling people, so it can be quite tough as well.
Hello, I'm Claire Thompson. I was on the Sloan programme in 2003. Just following on from that, how do you keep control of the brand, especially if you're selling off businesses? And secondly, have you ever found yourself in a situation where the brand might have been damaged by something going on that you had no control over? Keeping control of the brand is critical, and we have a brand company that enters into brand licensing deals with all the companies, and generally speaking, we try to make sure that we. It's the amount of companies we've sold is about 3 out of the 250, and they're not the kinds of companies, I think, where the people could do a lot of damage to the brand. There was one occasion where we licensed the brand for gas and electricity, and we very, very quickly took the brand off the people we'd licensed it to, because it's a risky business. Door-to-door selling of gas and electricity can go horribly wrong, and it did. And but fortunately we cut out the problem quite fast. So the brand licensing deal is the way that we protect it, and if anybody misuses the brand, we can take the brand away.
Adrian Gannon, former student, current staff member. One of the lessons we learn in the school is that all entrepreneurs make mistakes along the way, and the good ones recover from it and learn from it. And your successes are obvious, but could you share with us one or two of your mistakes? You mentioned the electricity and the gas. I don't think that's one, but is there anything else that you have learned from, and you'd be willing to share with us?
How long have we got? Well, I thought that there were lots of virgin brides, and launched Virgin Brides, only to find there weren't any virgin brides. When AIDS loomed its ugly head about 15 years ago, Durex dominated the British market, and they had about 99% of the market, and they were spending no money on advertising whatsoever. And so we thought the only way of encouraging people to wear condoms was to launch a condom company where we pledged all the profits back to good causes, and also to promote the use of condoms. And so we launched something called Mates. About 3 months after launching Mates, I got a letter from one of our clients, and they weren't very happy. Something had gone wrong. So I sat down and I wrote a long letter back, apologising profusely, and 9 months later got beautiful letter with a lovely picture of a little girl asking if I'd be godfather. Anyway, we now have a lovely 12-year-old goddaughter, and she's growing up well. So sometimes when things go wrong, there are good things that come. My son was on holiday with me last week, and we were in the Caribbean, and he went out with this. He's 19, this beautiful 17-year-old, and the next morning I said, "Well, how did you get on?" And he said, "Well, there were four words she said at the end of the evening." So I said, "Well, what were they?" And they were no glove, no love. Actually, I think it would be quite a good name for a brand of condoms in the Caribbean. But anyway.
Julian Ha, alumni board member. So Richard, I'd be grateful if you could share with us your thoughts on one of the most exciting and fast-growing markets in the world now, China, and maybe in particular what plans you have for bringing various Virgin brands into China in addition to the airlines, and also maybe your thoughts on the challenges and opportunities of doing business there. Thanks.
Sorry, where are you from yourself?
I'm from the States, actually.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Virgin's always, apart from maybe South America, treated the world as one country, and you know, we've got a brand which we never planned it that way, but you know, fortunately, it works on a global basis. You know, now when we're actually developing new products, we generally speaking won't go into a new industry unless we feel it could become a global industry, and therefore countries like China and India are enormous growing markets, and you know, if you see yourself as a global player, it would be ridiculous not to take China and India very seriously. China is more difficult, I suspect, than some overseas countries for non-Chinese people to invest in, and you know, we've set up our own team of people in China. We're about to launch into the mobile phone business in China. You know, we fly to China, to Shanghai, and you know, based on how well the mobile phone business goes in China, I'm sure we'll develop other businesses there. If you know, Western business people do not treat the world as one country, we will be swamped. I mean, you know, China, the rate it's growing, India, the rate it's growing, you know, we will soon become quite insignificant. The only way for us to stay significant is to actually, you know, be in there participating and growing companies there. And you know, we plan to play our part. Thank you.
My name is Wande. I'm on the Masters in Finance, currently in the school. What's your advice for young, intelligent Africans who yearn for opportunities to enrich their mind, make a difference in the world, but just at a disadvantage because they're on the wrong side of geography?
Well, I love Africa, and I spend a lot of my time in Africa. And as was mentioned earlier, we just sent up a entrepreneurial school in South Africa for specifically aimed at Africans, and I think Africa has a lot of opportunities, and it has an awful lot of problems, you know, as well, I'm sort of thinking of country by country, because Africa is obviously made up of, you know, so many different countries with so many different issues. Which country are you from, as a matter of interest? Nigeria. Okay. Well, Nigeria has enormous opportunities, and I mean, it's obviously one of the richest oil-producing countries in the world. It's a great trading nation. I mean, we were asked by the president of Nigeria to set up a national airline for Nigeria, which we've just done, called Virgin Nigeria, because you know, without an airline,
a country really can't expand. And I think Nigeria needs students who've studied well to go back there and build it, and hopefully it's becoming a less corrupt country, because I think if you're fundamentally corrupt as a country, society, it's a very dangerous society to live in. I mean, if the politicians of the country are corrupt, then you'll find that the police start becoming corrupt. If the police are corrupt, you get innocent people going to jail. And it just propels downwards. And I think what Nigeria needs is honest people running that country. And I think it's got a great future. The problems of Africa, the social problems of Africa, are enormous, and I don't think Africa can sort out the social problems on its own, and it needs people from all over the world to do their bit in trying to help address those problems. I mean, we as a group of companies have pledged that none of our staff will ever die from AIDS, and the way we're addressing it is to encourage our staff in Africa to test for HIV. If they test positive, we'll make sure that they get free antiretroviral drugs, and the amount of people who are now dying from AIDS at Virgin's reduced from an average of something like 25–30% of local people down there to less than 1%, and there's no reason why those people shouldn't live a full productive life. And there are one or two other companies in South Africa who have taken the same approach. Anglo-American, with a workforce of 150,000 people, was losing 30,000 people from AIDS. They've now reduced that again to less than 1%. And again, it's one of those things which, a bit like ethanol, it's actually good business sense to be socially responsible. If you're losing 30% of your workforce, it's immoral, but it's also means that people are going to be out ill. They're going to be going to funerals. I mean, it's a miserable existence. And I think one way of addressing the problems of Africa is for every single business to pledge that they will look after their own people, and then to try to persuade other businesses to do the same. And at least that's a start. But there's a long way to go there. I think also that in Africa, entrepreneurs can play a part alongside the charitable organisations in coming up with new approaches to problems like malaria. I mean, malaria, kills 2 million children and pregnant women a year, and yet malaria needn't and shouldn't exist. I mean, it's just this tiny little mosquito that spreads it, and the West got rid of malaria by using DDT. The moment they got rid of malaria, they effectively got DDT banned in Africa, and now DDT is it's not sensible to spray it all over the environment, but if you actually paint it on inside your houses, there's no environmental damage. It kills the mosquito. And you can wipe out malaria in Africa, and it just takes properly organising. But anyway, good luck.
Hello, it's Anthony Rowe. I've run my business about 20 years and came to London Business School about 15 years ago. What I would like to ask you is, have you identified in yourself what your personal strengths are and what actually makes you so exceptional to everybody else? And not meaning to embarrass you, would you be kind enough to perhaps share that with us?
Modestly, of course. No, I think the key to being a good business leader is how good you are with people. I think if you can genuinely care about people, and not just your fellow directors, but the cleaning lady, the switchboard operator, everybody throughout the company. If you're a good, if you praise and don't criticize,
people will flourish. So I think it's really your people skills that will set you apart. And I don't think that can be overemphasized. I think you just got to, if I'm on a Virgin plane, I will make sure that I always have a notebook in my back pocket. Make sure I get out and talk to all the staff. If they've got issues, make sure I don't just hear the issue and not write it down. Make sure those issues get written down. Talk to the passengers. If they've got issues, make sure those issues get written down. And in any one day, in my back pocket, I'll have at least 15 different items. If I didn't write them down, I had a meeting yesterday with somebody, and there were issues after issues coming up, and I noticed they weren't writing them down. And I said, "Are you going to remember them all?" He said, "Yes, I've got them. I've got them all in my brain." And I just knew that that at least half of the issues would just disappear. And since a lot of the time I spend with my staff is actually propping up a bar at night times, I know that a lot more than half are going to disappear unless I write them down. So.
So Richard, Francis Tan from this year's Sloan program. I'm from Singapore. Just leading on a team about people in your line of work, you probably have to size up the entrepreneurs that come and talk to you, choosing the people to take the opportunity. So what are your criteria, your rules of thumb in selecting the people to work with? And in interviewing them, what's the single most important question that you'll ask?
Well, I'm a great believer in promoting from within the company and not necessarily from promoting without. We do on occasions bring people from outside, but the advantage of promoting from within the company is people from within the company know that they've got a chance of growing with the company, and it can be quite demoralising if you keep bringing people in from outside above people. And so by the time we've actually promoted somebody, we know their weaknesses, we know their strengths, and it's very rare you actually make a mistake. On occasions we bring people from outside. I used to interview people. I'm not sure I was that good at it. I always started ending up apologising for being such a bad interviewer. But again, I mean, if I'm doing the interview, I just want to be sure that that they will be good. They will be good motivators of people. That they'll get around them managers who care, and that's my basic criteria. There are other people at Virgin who I'm sure will be looking for different kinds of skills, but that would be what I'd be looking for.
My name is Shirish Apte. I'm with Citigroup, but I'm an alumni of London Business School. Virgin is synonymous with Richard Branson. So I've always wondered how you persuade your board of directors to let you go up in a hot air balloon for extended periods of time over expansive water and things like that.
I just make sure that I own the company. So. No, I mean yeah. I mean, looking back on my life, I've got a very understanding board of directors and parents. In fact, I've got my father here with me today, and it was, in some ways you could say it's quite selfish what I was doing. I mean, it was magnificent, and it put the Virgin name on the map on a global basis, and it was I thoroughly enjoyed doing it. But I was lucky to survive, and I'm very lucky to be here today. And we came very, very close not to surviving on a number of occasions. Whether I do it again, if I live my life again, I'm not sure. It was I certainly rolled the dice, maybe a number of times. Somebody was being very kind to me anyway. So, but thank you.
If I could just take you back to that question, sorry, Faisal Gwadri, Financing Entrepreneurial Business course. The question about selecting people. I mean, you're very interesting answer the context of Virgin as it is today. Question. If I could take you back to when you were starting out, and choosing your initial team, the people you were going to build your business with, how did you go about that? And in hindsight, what would you have done differently, if anything?
Well, I was 15, 16 years old at the time, and it was basically just looking for anybody who was willing to work for nothing and pay me rent for a bed on the basement floor, which was literally almost what it was. So, and if I met a Dutch girl, she'd become, I would appoint her the Dutch foreign editor of my magazine. If I met a German girl, she'd be the German editor. Anyway, we were having a lot of fun, and we never thought of ourselves as running a business. We wanted to grow a magazine to change the world. It was late 60s. There was a Vietnamese war going on, and students wanted a voice, and we really thought we could change the world, and to an extent, we managed to stop the Vietnamese War, I think, or had all played our part in it. So, marching on the American embassy, and I expect there's some people who wish we'd actually all managed to stop another war that's going on at the moment. But there we go. When you're starting out in business, I think it's you want a group of people. You want to all make sure you get on really well together. I once had a cousin who popped in from South Africa. He said he knew a lot about music. Asked him, how big a record collection he had. He said he had something like 2,000 records. So I immediately pointed him to run our new record company, which we hadn't started, and it turned out to be a good choice as it worked out.
I'm going to take one more question, and then I'm going to ask a question which will lead us to the film. So let me go back over there. Yes, right there.
Hi, I'm Nigel Boyce, second year EMBA student. Today Tesco's results came out and they were doing very well, and in Britain there seems to be this kind of thing about if a company is too successful and it's too dominant in its marketplace, it's not a good thing, so there's always a backlash. Does Virgin ever actually consider whether they're becoming too successful in the marketplace, and do you think there is a concept that a company can be too successful?
Yes, I think a company can be too successful, and that's what governments are there to protect against. I think it's not in the interests of consumers. It's actually most likely not in the interests of the company itself if you become too dominant, and governments must, under all circumstances, do everything they can to avoid. To avoid people dominating a marketplace, and if Virgin ever become dominant in any particular sector that we're in, we would expect the government to intervene to try to make sure that that we do not become too dominant, even to go to the length of, say, splitting a big dominant company into two. And interestingly, when Virgin started many years ago, and every time our record company got too big, I would go in and I would say to the deputy managing director, "You are now the managing director of a new company." I'd say to the deputy marketing manager, "You're now the marketing manager of a new company." I'd say to the deputy sales manager, "You're now the sales manager of a new company." And we kept on breaking Virgin into small new record companies till we had about 20 of them. With those 20 people enjoy working for smaller companies, and those 20 small companies, I think, were that much stronger than one big company. But in the specific case of Tesco's, it's really for the government to decide. Is it in the interests of the consumer? What's it doing to the smaller retailers? And the fact that they've grown organically. Do they therefore get away from a monopoly investigation or not? are they treating farmers correctly? I mean, they have become very, very, very powerful, and it's an interesting question as to whether they've become too powerful or dangerously powerful. So I don't think that might is always right. I think you've got to have governments there to balance the books. Thank you.
Okay, we have the opportunity, if you'd like, to see the film about Galactic. Would you enjoy it?
Away.
I would love to. I've heard it's a great film. So, as I said at the beginning, the next frontier for Sir Richard is space. He's gotten pretty close to that already, but this is the next frontier. And there's a short film about his venture called Galactic. Is that right? So maybe we'll see it.
We've been fortunate enough to have achieved some pretty extraordinary things at Virgin over the years, but perhaps none quite as amazing as what you'll see in the next few minutes. Virgin Galactic is now well on its way to becoming the world's first commercial space line, thanks to Burt Rutan, Spaceship One, and those flawless history-making X Prize flights. The day that Burt won the X Prize was a hugely significant one for us. When it was all over, I remember chatting to Bran Binney, the pilot on that epic flight.
It's got all the right elements to excite the people for all the right reasons. The ride up is momentous, the view at the top is hugely rewarding, the ride back down is pretty spectacular as well. The pictures are pretty dramatic, but the eye is so much more dynamic. You combine that with the other things going on, the weightlessness, it's pretty wonderful. The rocket motor ride is pretty memorable as well. You're not going to soon forget that, especially ignition.
You get 3 Gs on your back instantly when it lights. And boy, that first 10 seconds, about the most dynamic flying I've ever done. When you look out the window and you see the curvature of the Earth and you can see the edge, along the edge of the Earth, you can see this thin blue line that is the atmosphere. And the colors and the textures on the ground, and it's just, it's a mind-blowing thing to see. It really is. I mean, I'm sure everybody who's been in the shuttle or on the space station knows the same thing, but I'd never seen that before, and it really, really was a remarkable experience.
We have the right technology, we have committed the funding, and importantly, we bring an enormous amount of operational expertise that comes from years of carrying millions of passengers in comfort and safety on our aircraft and trains. Every day, people from all walks of life and many different countries are making reservations with us to experience space for themselves. Our first Virgin Galactic astronauts will be booking their own place in history as pioneers of a new space age.
We are in the process of optimizing, absolutely optimizing the experience that you will have when you fly in space. And it's just going to be fabulous.
Well, I hope you'll be as excited and inspired by Virgin Galactic's mission as I am. And I'll see you up there.
I suspect you're all going to have to work very hard, please. We're selling tickets now.
When's the launch date? When's the first ride?
30 months' time.
30 months?
Yeah.
30 months, all right.
My dad's going. You are coming, aren't you, Dad? He's on sticks. You won't need sticks up there, right?
He's training as an astronaut now.
Absolutely.
Anyway, we want to give a tremendous welcome to you. Thank you so very much for being with us today. As I said, you have been someone who the students have wanted to have for a long time. We're very proud that a couple of our students this year have joined Virgin Unite. I'm sure some of our students will sign up for this. I don't think I will, but I do actually believe...
As long as you fly Virgin Atlantic, it's your promise.
I will do that. I will do that. I will continue to do that. But I wouldn't normally believe in the mission of space as a consumer product, but under Sir Richard's leadership, I do believe in it. I do believe it will happen. So thank you very much for being with us. We have some small traveling clothes for you, which maybe we'll see on Virgin. No, this should...
What are you saying?
This should work well. This should work perfectly.